give me one shot here on a blue chip stock, believe me, Kevin, the only problem you're gonna have is that you didn't buy more.
Nobody knows if the stock is going to go up, down, sideways, or in circles.
What's going on, NBA draft fans? Your boys are back. The Wolves of Ball Street, your favorite draft analysts' favorite draft analysts. It is the NBA Draft Show on the No Ceilings NBA podcast and YouTube feed. My name's Corey Telba. I'm here, as always, back-to-back weeks with Albert Garbage Time. Gim, Albert, how we feeling today?
It's great to be building consistency again. I take a lot of pride in being consistent, but it's good to be back. I won't lie to you, Corey. It's been a rough couple of days for me as a sports fan. My Knicks got knocked out. My favorite soccer team lost the title.
Okay.
A lot of different things are moving and shaking, not in a good way. But look, it's good. That means that I get to refocus all of my energy back on just the draft because I have nothing else to root for except for the Yankees, but long season. So here I am.
A lot of baseball left to be played.
True.
You know what? The Knicks left it all on the court. So you really can't ask for anything more than that, right?
I'm ridiculously proud. I mean, guys literally had muscles ripping off their body. In Josh Hart, his abdomen just gave up, and Brunson broke his hand, and we did what we could. But I just want to say, Corey, before we get into this, as a huge supporter of Coach Tibbs, like, if you think this was his fault, you're wrong. It is what it is. A lot of the injuries were freak accidents. I'm really excited for what this team looks like next year, and I'll leave it at that.
Some positive Brunson news, perhaps, maybe willing to take the extension, which
I was ecstatic seeing that news.
Let's wait for the ink to dry on that contract before we get too excited, but I wouldn't put it past them. Shout out to everybody watching live. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to D. Steven, who says, hope you guys are doing well. Thanks for the hard work and shows. Thank you for rocking with us and watching. Alex, I believe, ALX in the chat says, love Bub. I'm very excited to talk about Bub Carrington as well. Albert, who do you want to start with? Because we're going back to, the old school draft deck / NBA draft show days of just like straight scouting dudes and getting into it. So which guy we're going to cover? Isaiah Collier from USC. And we're going to cover Bub Carrington, Carlton Carrington from Pitt, freshman guards, some similarities, some differences, a little yin and yang, but I think it's a fun juxtaposition of two prospects in this draft that are really intriguing for one reason or the other. So which guy do you want to start with?
I think I'm okay with us starting with Bub just because I think we're going to have more to say about Bub because we've already done like a preseason pod on Collier. So that'll be kind of like hey, this is kind of what we've seen since then type of thing. So I don't mind starting with Bub today.
All right. I love it. I'm very excited about that. So Bub Carrington, Pittsburgh guard, 6'5" in shoes, 195 came in at the combine. 6'8" wingspan, 18.9 years old on draft night. He is the youngest domestic prospect in the draft. So I think Saloon is younger, Topic, maybe Pacome, I think might have been a little younger, but outside of the foreign guys, he is the youngest domestic prospect. Averaged 33.2 minutes per game this year, 13.8 points per game, 5.2 rebounds, 4.1 assists to just 1.9 turnovers. 0.6 steals, 0.2 blocks, shot 41.2% from the field, 32.2% from three on 6.1 3-point attempts, 78.5% on free throws on 2.8 attempts per game. True shooting 53, effective field goal 49.6, PER 16.3, BPM 3.9. That 195 was a pretty good number for him weighing in at the combine. I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was gonna be. I think I said like long sleeve guys maybe come in weighing a little less than you would think, and he came in I think better than I thought. He weighs the same as Ron Holland does. So I thought that was a positive for him for sure. And if you look at it, he's got like broad shoulders and they get hidden a little bit in the shirt, but so decent frame there. Stock price preseason, or at least the draft deck IPO. So this was very, very early in the season when this dropped in November. But I believe Bub had already at this point dropped his triple double. So certain outlets maybe hadn't updated their boards. Some were very quick to do so. ESPN did not have him listed. No Ceilings did not have him listed. Bleacher Report had him at 10. Yahoo at 18. Athletic not listed. Tankathon not listed. He ended up 47th ranked prospect on the Draft Deck IPO with an average stock price of 51.7. Currently, ESPN has him at 25. No Ceilings at 40. Bleacher Report at 38. Yahoo at 22. The Ringer at 23. The Athletic at 22. Tankathon at 34. Average stock price 29.1. 26th ranked prospect on May's draft rankings. So pretty big leap, 20-ish spots there for him from beginning of the year to now. So with that said, Albert, I ask you, is Bub Carrington stock price too high, too low, or just right?
I'm going to say right now that I think his stock price is too low, which is a surprising thing for me to even say, considering I've had him pretty low on my board consistently. And then in the last couple of weeks, I've moved him up a ton. And I think Corey, we're going to get into the scout, but you started off today talking about he's the youngest domestic player we have in this class. And that was something that I really needed to kind of process for myself, where I knew Carrington was young, but thinking about it like over and over again and watching his film again, I actually have multiple scouting reports of Carrington in my notebook because I kind of did the deep dive of him a couple of times this season because I was so confounded by his game. But overall, Corey, I'm going to say it's too low because he's a really, really interesting prospect and he happens to be crazy young. And so I currently have him at 23 on my board. And so, yeah, I've moved him up quite a bit.
I also think it's too low. And I've gotten to the point, I have him in the top 10.
There it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that he is as good a swing as you could take in this draft. And I know that there are guys who came into this preseason as, the lottery projected guys, RSCI rankings, all that stuff. And, that means something, that's worth considering for sure. But at the same time, when I look at his game and I look at the skills, which we'll break down, and I look at his age and I look at his size, and I look at his warts and I say, do I think that they are correctable? I just see a guy who has a very modern game, put up some really impressive production. And if I'm going to swing on a prospect, look, I think that he's shown enough that I'm very, very willing to take him in the lottery. I think for a number of reasons. His skill set, his ability to play with other people, I think, his ability to just do things that, at an NBA level. He has an NBA level skill. And I'm excited to talk about that skill in particular and some of the other stuff. I've gotten to a point where some of these other guys, I'm just like, all right, are we just saying that they're lottery prospects because we don't really have any other choice because they were ranked there to start? Or like, are we? I just think that he's as likely a swing as any, man. I was really impressed with him and his game, and we're going to be fair and talk about the stuff he's not good at too. But I'm very, very intrigued by Bub in the long term.
Corey, I think that monologue you just gave, I think, is right on the mark because let's really call it for what it is. There are some guys that are consistently being discussed in the top 5, in the top 10, that I think you and I, Corey, especially are low on. And we don't believe deserve to be in that conversation. And meanwhile, I think Carrington is the exact opposite of that, exactly what you're talking about. So if anything, maybe I need to continue to work on where I have him as well, because I don't have him in the top 10, but I'm ready to get into the scout with you, and
Well,
I can have my mind changed.
I don't even know if the other guys that were lower on don't deserve to be considered in the top 10. I think they probably do deserve consideration there for a number of reasons. I just think none of these guys have standout skills that you can bank on and be like, this is what this dude is going to do great at the next level, and this is why it works. And I think Bub probably does have that. And I think he deserves to be there. I mean, Kizis in the comments says this player doesn't deserve praise, but I can see teams getting high on Carrington for the same reasons the Spurs reached on Josh Primo. And look, if we start hearing, hey, Bub Carrington is working his way into the lottery discussion, I'm not going to be shocked, especially like a team like Portland. And we could talk about fits and stuff later. They have 2 picks in the lottery. And like, all right, if they took Bub with one of them and swung, like, dude, I'm with it. Like, even with their pick at 7, like, I think he could play next to Scoot. I think he could play with Simons. I think he could play next to Sharp. Like, I just think this is a kid who's super talented. In this draft, if we're going to talk about how there's not a ton of talent and, you know, it's different than regular drafts, if you're going to swing, like, this is a dude you can swing on. So I think it's time to kind of like break down his game a little bit. Where do you want to start, you know, with the actual like skill breakdowns?
Let's keep it kosher, Corey. We'll keep it as we always do. Let's start with the shooting.
Okay. Because I think the shooting, there's a lot to discuss with it, right? Because this is what he does. He shoots a lot, you know, like not like he shoots a lot like Cam Thomas shoots a lot,
right?
But like his shot diet is a lot of jumpers, right? So talk to me about his shooting, because if you look at the numbers, you know, pretty pedestrian, you know, 41% from the field, 32.2% from 3, 78.5% from the lines, pretty good. So where are you at with his shooting?
I think the first thing that I want to say, Corey, I think what you just said about the diet is really important. He took a lot of them, but this is how I'm framing things and what I wrote in my notes for the pod today. What we saw from Carrington in terms of his shooting display at Pitt, take it however you want to take it, right? Let's say you're on the low end and you're like, I didn't like what I saw, or you're on the high end and you really liked what you saw. I can see it both ways. I think what we saw at Pitt was actually the floor of the type of shooter that he's going to be. So this was, in my mind, the foundation of the type of shooter that I think Bub Carrington is actually going to be. And that is considering all the warts, all the good, all the bad, everything in between. I think Carrington, what we saw in his freshman season at Pitt, that shooting display, the efficiency, everything is the absolute floor with him, is the conclusion that I walked away with.
I feel the same way, honestly. Like I wrote, like, I think he's going to be an above average shooter, even with the blah efficiency. I think he's got good form, especially up top. High volume of 3-point attempts. So 32.2% on threes, but it was on 11 threes per 100 possessions. And that is like real deal shooting volume. And a lot of those threes were very difficult shots off the bounce, which goes into his tough shot diet. But he is an excellent off the dribble guy. I think he might be the best off the bounce shooter in this entire draft. And that includes Rob Dillingham. Now, Dillingham, clearly a better percentage wise, like from distance. But if we're just looking at straight up like dribble jumpers, Bub Carrington scored more, like hit a higher percentage of dribble jumpers. Now, maybe the efficiency could be a little bit lower because of the 3-point disparity, but just as far as dribble jumpers go, Bub Carrington is a really, really impressive off the dribble shooter. Confident with a hand in his face. Sometimes some of these shots, maybe it's like a little too confident, and this goes into where we get into some of his warts. He can pull up in transition, stop on a dime and shoot. And he does that a lot. Honestly, sometimes I would like him to not do that, and I'd like him to attack the cup. But I digress. Off balance shots, like off DHOs and stuff. I'm with it. I think the shooting, like the catch and shoot stuff, I think needs to get better. I think that his shot prep is not always like excellent when he's like spacing. I think, he's not like consistently hopping, or he's not like consistently stepping into it. I think he's got like some work to do there, but like I said, he's very, very, very young. So I think it's workable. But he is always balanced, and like up top, it looks really, really good. And so I am in on the shooting, but there are certainly things that he's going to, need to shore up. But like you said, I think that this is kind of what his floor looks like as a shooter as well. And when you talk about the kind of shots that he's able to shoot, man, I mean, again, like he can get into he can create space. He can shoot with a hand in his face. He can shoot not. I just think it's a really, really valuable skill set for him, so that's where I'm at.
Corey, I love everything that you said. A couple of things that I wrote down here. First off, I hate that you beat me to the punch, because I actually feel exactly the same in terms of I think he's the best dribble jump shooter in the class. And I didn't expect to feel that way, because when I did his initial scouting report in January, a lot of my notes were like, damn, like I wish the decision making was a little bit better. I wish the shot die was a little bit healthier, with some of the stuff that I wrote down. And then as I got into later in the season, something that I wanted to highlight, his efficiency, as you mentioned, wasn't great, but it was consistent, whether it was, throughout the season or in conference play. It was right about pretty similar, which I want to give him credit for. But at the same time, it kind of is what it is, right? He stayed consistent throughout the season. As you mentioned, Corey, I think there's something about his lower half. Sometimes like his legs and his knees look a little strange at times on shots, which I think easy to clean up, because ultimately the shot at the top does look clean, like you said. I think his handle is good. I think he creates good separation. Metcalf wrote a piece about him earlier in the season, compared him to SGA, but of course, guys, don't overreact. Metcalf wasn't saying that Bub was going to be SGA. It's just that in the way that Bub was creating separation, there were hints of SGA and how he did that. And so I wanted to give Metcalf a shout out on that, because I thought he wrote a really, really, really good piece on him. And just watching Carrington, you can see it. The mid-range stuff, really nice. The way that he can pull up and he takes it with so much confidence, and like his decisiveness coming off ball screens is really great to see. As you mentioned, Corey, and we'll get into the at-rim finishing and all that stuff later, but I think sometimes, even with his outside shooting, if you watch his misses, sometimes they're like really short. And I think that also comes from strength. I think there's a strength piece overall with Bub that we're going to have to continue to see, I think, in his lower half and his upper body. But the reason why I really moved Carrington up a ton on my board was because watching him at the combine, as you mentioned, Corey, he weighed in at 195. And in my mind, from what I saw, you could actually see his gain of mass. Like he actually looked bigger, a little bit thicker overall. And for me, it's like, well, if he's going to be playing at 6'5", 6'5.5" in shoes, have that type of mass, and have all the shot space creation, quickness to him, then obviously he becomes way more interesting. But the biggest thing with me, with Carrington and his shooting, I just feel like he's got the confidence, number one. And that's something that I wrote about even in my piece for PJ Hall that's coming out this week. There are a lot of guys who are theoretical shooters, and you kind of get caught up in like the nitty gritty of their jump shots. But at the end of the day, like mechanics aside, if a guy's not willing to take the shots, then you'll never really freaking know if they can shoot it or not. And I think the thing that I liked about Carrington in his freshman season was that he wasn't shy. The numbers back it up. You already went over those numbers. He was willing to take the shots. He was a freshman on that team, and he took a lot of the responsibility on offense to put up, to number one, take tough shots, but also make tough shots. And I think that should be a part of his evaluation, and we should give him credit for that as well.
Yeah, spot on there. A lot of people in the chat are, mentioning kind of the Spurs again, another team with 2 top picks. We talk about them all the time, like guard creators. Like, if he went 8 to the Spurs, like would that be shocking to me? To me, no. Maybe at where we're at right now in the process, still maybe before like we start hearing the lead up to the draft and the intel that comes out with that, maybe it would be shocking. But like I can see that, I really can. But yeah, to me, all the theoretical stuff, like you said, like he's showing the shots he's willing to take. And the fact that he's able to knock down these tough shots. I mean, dude, he had some shots against Clemson, like that. I was like, he went on a little run. I was like, woo! Like that is a crazy high level NBA shot. And like there are just these flashes of shot creation and stuff that are just super important. Like just straight up one of the best like get a bucket shot makers in the class. And I if not the best, like you said. And I think there's value in that. Didn't get a ton into like didn't get a ton of floaters off, but like the floaters that he did take, you could tell he has good touch because he's so comfortable pulling up in at like the elbow area and shooting those like long 15-foot jumpers that he doesn't always probe and get a little bit deeper to get into the floater range. And part of that is just like him, attacking all the way to the cup. And I'm sure we're going to get into the finishing very, very shortly. But like the fact that he can like snake a ball screen and then rise up and he doesn't have to be fully set, but he's still able to maintain balance in the air and get like good, like solid looks off to where it doesn't feel like he's just chucking it. Like I don't know, like there are shots like sometimes where you're like, all right, like we can rein that in. And that's part of like being young and we can learn from that with shot selection. That's normal for a lot of these young prospects. But at the same time, I do feel like a lot of his like the shots he was taking, it's more like, can we get deeper and get to the rim instead of pulling up there? Like but they don't feel like forces necessarily. It just feels like him getting to a spot he's comfortable at.
Yeah.
And he's going to have to learn how to get downhill a little bit more and maybe with the added strength. And I feel like he was attacking a little bit more towards the end of the season. Yeah. But maybe as he continues to fill out, we'll see more of that stuff and it'll be a more like appropriate shot diet. Because right now, like, honestly, one of the reasons he is such a tough prospect to predict, and you can't be like, well, this is a certainty that he's going to be like a star or like even like a really good starting point guard or something. It's just like, there are not a lot of dudes that fit his profile.
Mm-hmm.
Only 14% of his possessions were at the rim. Like the volume on his rim stuff is just super, super low. You know what I mean? Like in a lot of ways, he's kind of like the anti-Judah Mintz. So like, to be perfectly honest, it also, I feel like kind of shows like from that position, the value of shot making for a guard like that versus like the ability to get to the rim and not be able to make shots. Like, I just think teams are going to value what Bub brings versus a guy like Judah, who's ball dominant and like has to get downhill to generate good offense. But like, I don't think it's like Keyshawn George doesn't like, he lacks burst, right? Like, like he's almost like slow-mo, like in slow motion. Yeah. And he's huge. And like, if he puts on strength, like I'm sure he won't have, a ton of trouble getting to the rim. But Bub is like 6'5", 6'8" wingspan right now, close to 200 pounds. Like he'll continue to fill out. Like I think he's a little bit quicker. Like he's quicker than Keyshawn George is. So like, I don't think it's like a quickness issue. I think it's for him, he just feels so comfortable in the mid range and like, he feels like he can get to good shots almost at any point. Which is why he doesn't get downhill a ton, but it's like, there aren't a lot of guards that like only shoot that percentage of shots at the rim. Like Tyler Hero, I think, like Mike Conley and like old Mike Conley. So it is rare and he is going to have to make a more concerted effort to drive to the basket. And like, I wouldn't even necessarily say he's a bad finisher at this point because I don't think the sample is really large enough to say he's a bad finisher. But it's also not large enough to be like he's a good finisher either, like, so you have to kind of go on like what the film says. And like, there are times when he shows pretty good touch and whatnot. I really like when he does attack the rim, he has these strides and he'll use to extend and get to the rim and create a little bit more separation. So there are things to like, but it's just, let's change the diet up a little bit. We don't have to, we don't have to take ice cream completely out. But let's cut down on the ice cream a little bit. For sure. More
salads. But Corey, no, I agree. I think the biggest thing something you said earlier that I think is really, really important you said that when he comes off a ball screen, sometimes in your mind, you're like, damn, I wish you kind of took it all the way. And sometimes you'll see him take a mid-range jumper and you're like, in your head, you're like, I wish he went all the way. While I was watching Bub, I 100% agree with you, Corey. There are a couple of possessions I was like, dude, like the cup is there for you to take it. But I think in his mind, he would come off of these screens, and I thought he did a really good job of coming off screens, which I know it
I
feels
love
like a
his
minor.
pace.
Exactly. It
love
might
his
seem like a
pace.
minor detail to people, but that's really, really important if you're a point guard that is going to play in a lot of ball screen possessions. Like being able to time that perfectly, get the right angles, and like really have your guy go into the screen is an important thing. But in my mind, Corey, I thought it was like, I thought his mindset was, oh, I got to the spot that I freaking wanted to get to. So this is a win for me type of thing. Right. Now,
Albert,
of course,
I would love to ask him that at some point soon if we happen to talk to him.
Great lead. A little foreshadowing there. Love it. But Corey, I think ultimately, as you mentioned, that's why you get to the NBA, and that's why these coaches get paid millions of dollars, right? Is to work on that type of stuff, fix those types of things. And I do want to talk about his finishing here because I love everything that you said. I think the sample size is way too small for us to make a definitive statement on him as a finisher. However, there were enough, I think, flashes and shades of things for us to at least talk about it, right?
Yeah,
the first thing that I want to say, the first thing I wanted to say, quickness is there. I read somewhere, I don't remember where I read it, but they were saying that he's not a good athlete and that he wasn't fast. And I was like, well, okay, that's fine. I mean, you're entitled to your own opinion, but I was like, I think he's pretty damn quick. Right. And I want to give him that. Number two, I really like his extension when he does get to the rim. I think he does a good job of using his length to, attempt some difficult layups that might be difficult for other people. Right. The one thing that I did notice, though, is, and this comes with the lack of strength. Right. There were times that he would get to the cup and you would see him kind of avoid the contact. Now, in my mind, with the weight that he was at, right, and before, and maybe the lack of strength, I think that's all understandable. If he was the weight he is now and he has the strength and all that stuff, then I think it would have turned out differently. I think it was just at that point in his development, at that point in the season, he was just making the best decision considering the lack of strength that he had, is kind of how I'm thinking about it. Because, Corey, I didn't think he was afraid of contact, nor did I think it was something that he was trying to avoid. I just think time to time, he just made the best decision for himself. And I hope that makes sense, because if he was afraid of contact, I don't think he would have had as like aggressive, like there were a good chunk of drives that he had at the basket that were really aggressive, that were almost violent, right? And my thing was like, if you're afraid of contact, I don't think you would have it in you to even try some of the drives that he did. And so I want to start there. I think it's something that, as you mentioned, we need to see more of. And then also one last thing, I think his offhand finishing, what came and went. Like, I think there are some that were really nice and then some that he absolutely bricked. And I was like, okay, so we know that you have it, and we also know that you're not afraid. Let's continue to work on that. So I think my overall evaluation of his finishing was that, number one, as you mentioned, the volume was really low. And I think it was okay, but it can be better. I think the strength aspect will make it better. And then him working on that offhand finishing will continue to make it better. But I think the foundation of him having the quickness, about the good angles that he takes and the length that he has, I think all those factors with coaching and time and development in his body will lead to him actually being a good finisher, is kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah. I think that he will get to like league average finishing at the, like, I don't think he's going to be Kyrie around the rim or anything, but I think that he's going to be league average eventually. I think the strength plays a big part of it. Like early in the season, especially, he would like, because he doesn't have like the same like straight line speed as like an Isaiah Collier.
Right.
If a guy would be on his hip, you want to see the guy with the ball initiate the first bump so you don't get bumped off your spot. And he kind of would get bumped off his spot, and he would have to kind of fade away on his attempts at the rim.
Yes.
Instead of like really going into the contact and drawing a foul and getting to the free throw line where he's a good free throw shooter. he attacked more aggressively towards the end of the season, it seemed like. And then in that, like, you know, he was then navigating how to do that. So like, that's where you would see some of the inconsistency with the offhand. Sometimes he would do kind of like, you know, get into traffic, do the little like carryover move, keep the carry cradle thing, like go up. And sometimes it would be like good touch. Sometimes it wouldn't. Sometimes he would kind of try to like do like the decel and then like come back. And instead of finishing with the left, he'd kind of like put it up with the right and like an off balance thing. He did that a couple of times against UNC. I think one of the times he got fouled and it went in. One of the times he missed it. And it was like, maybe if you just keep going straight and taking your momentum, you do draw the foul. So I think that, like you said, the sample is not quite big enough to like make a definitive statement on the results either way. If he comes in and he struggles around the rim, because there's going to be bigger, stronger defenders in the NBA, or not comes in, he's going to come in, he's going to struggle like most of these guys. But like, you know, down the line when he's a seasoned pro, if he's like not the best finisher at the rim, I'm not going to be shocked, you know, because he's got to deal with, you know, Embiid and Gobert and Vic and all these guys. So, but also if he figures it out and he's able to like figure out how to mess with the shot diet. And I think that's why like he's going to be hard to guard, because you're going to have to play up as a big, a little bit higher up in the drop, because he's going to be able to come off the screen and bury a mid-range jumper. He's going to feel comfortable doing that. It's why I kind of want to see the floater a little bit more, because now you want to get a guy backpedaling. You just want like to be unpredictable, and the more ways he can be unpredictable. And I think he already has the steps in his game to get to unpredictability, to where like if he doesn't have the same, you know, like burst as some of these other guys who get to the rim all the time, that's fine. Like he doesn't need to just run as fast as he can to the rim. Like he can play at different speeds and with different pace. Like I think that's the thing that we see. Like the NBA now, like the guys who play with the ball in their hands, you need to play with pace. You'll like, if you can play with pace and you can be manipulative and make decisions in a really patient manner, and you know how to get to spots on the floor, you're going to be able to get to your spots on the floor. If you have to rely on just barreling into guys, that's not how the game works when the stakes are the highest all the time. At least not when you're like a guy who plays with the ball in their hands all the time. You might be Josh Hart making a 45 cut and like you get the ball and you just run in a straight line as fast as you can because you're a maniac and you'd run through a brick wall for the Knicks. And like sometimes that could work. But like if you're a guy who plays with the ball in your hands, you have to be a little bit more cerebral in what you're doing. And I think he can do that. And I think him being cerebral, and we've talked about his scoring for so long, like this is all to say, like he can also pass and like make plays, and he can make like whatever play. Like he can make all of the plays, you know? Yep. He like for a guy who did play with the ball in his hands a lot, like he only had like a 23% usage rate, which is not like super crazy. So he's a guy that you can see playing off of other guys. And that's part of what I like about him, like coming off DHOs and being able to shoot off balance. That's why we need him to, become a more consistent spot up shooter. But like he is, I think, going to be capable of doing that. I can foresee that. But then the playmaking stuff and him being able to do like every read, he could hit the pocket pass. He's got the height that he can throw over and hit the roller over the top. He can make the throw over the throwbacks to the pop man. He can paint the corners and the wings, the weak side. Like he can make the jump passes or whatever. Like he's very creative. But for a guy that we're saying is the youngest prospect in this draft, domestically, and one of the youngest overall, he only had a 13% turnover rate too in the ACC. And he's a creative passer. Like, it's not like he was just making like the one more. Like, this is a dude who has real passing upside to go along with the pull-up stuff. So, and like, because he's got this pull-up stuff, he's going to force rotations. He's going to make guys have to rotate over, and he's going to be able to hit these windows. If he was just a pull-up scorer, I'd be like, not that interesting.
Right. Like,
somewhat interesting, but, maybe not that interesting because he can't fit. But the fact that he can make plays too is what makes him so appealing to me on the offensive side of the ball.
Corey, I love what you said. 24% assist percentage this season. Freshman guard. As you mentioned, not gigantic usage, 23%, turnover percent, 13. Like, it's special stuff. And he's also 6'5", And I'm going to say he's 6'5" because he's playing in shoes.
Yes.
So I'd rather
That's
just
a good
focus
point.
on what he's playing in shoes. So he's 6'5", maybe even 6'5.5", depending on what he's wearing. I love it, right? When bigs hard hedge and they blitz or whatever, he's going to be able to make that pass over the top. Something we saw with Brunson in the playoffs. A lot of times you get blitzed, and sometimes the length and the size was a little overwhelming, and you'd see a little bit of delay in the Knicks getting into their offense. And I think with Bub, with his size and his length, and his vision, I think it's going to get really, really fun. And depending on what team he ends up with, right, like the type of stuff he'll be able to do in ball screens as a shooter, of course. And I was listening to the Rosillo pod today, and he was talking with Tim Legler, and Legler was talking about ball screens and how when James Naismith created the game and he was explaining ball screens to the kids, he's probably telling them, when you get off a ball screen, your first instinct is to shoot. Right, you're getting a clean look so you can get a bucket, right? And the reason why he brought it up, because he was talking about Tyrese Halliburton and some of his inconsistencies in that Knicks series, right? Like in Game 5, he went MIA, and a couple other, I think Game 1, 2, he was kind of missing. But the overall conversation was about if you're a guard and you're coming off a ball screen and you got a clean look, the first thought in your head should be to score, right? Regardless of you being an unselfish player or whatever. And with Bub, it's the same thing. Like, he's going to come off these ball screens and he's going to think to score. However, what he's been able to show, and the numbers and the advanced numbers back it up, Corey, is that when the defense isn't giving him that jumper, right, he has the wherewithal and the passing ability to make the correct pass wherever it is on the floor. And I think that is such an important thing with Carrington, in that, number one, he has that scoring instinct as his main priority, but also his passing stuff is way above average. He's a very, very good passer with real vision, with anticipation, and the fact that he has the size and length to make the passes over taller defenders is what makes him really, really interesting. So, Corey, I love everything that you said, and I think the fact that he can do the fun stuff, some of the live dribble passes with him have been really, really fun. As I mentioned,
Eye manipulation.
Exactly. Eye manipulation's a big one too. We love that, especially us '90s guys watching like Jason Williams, Mike Bibby, Stephon Marbury. Like they did a lot of that back in the day. But no, he's really good, man. He's really, really good.
Yeah, I think he's really interesting. Mr. Ray in the chat says, if we're talking upside, I think Bub is in the top 5 of the entire class. Kid has game, just requires refinement and seasoning. I think that's a pretty good argument to be made for that, to be completely honest. But yeah, like honestly, the passing and the fact that he's a decision maker. Like I think you can be a really creative passer, but not be a good decision maker. I think you can be have really good vision, but not be like a good decision maker. And I think when you're young, and like all the the prospects we talk about are mostly young, and even the older guys are not done developing by any means. But like, so I think sometimes you can explore the studio space and it's fine. But like, he's already at the point where like he's already proven that he's going to make solid decisions with the ball, and it's not something you have to guess and hope gets better. You're going to be able to trust him to be able to do that. So like, a lot of the bet is going to be like on him getting stronger. And I think that he has a good frame to do it. And I wasn't sure, that the long sleeve tee really threw me off earlier, but like, I think, like you said, you could see at the combine that he looked a little bit bigger. It seems like he's putting in work in the weight room, and he came in at 195, and I thought that was a really positive sign for him to get to, like, I feel NBA teams, some of the teams I've talked to, like 200 is like, where you want to be at as a guard. Now he's a bigger guard, so you hope that he's going to be, stronger than that. And I think he can get stronger than that. But I think that he is on a really good trajectory physically right now. Now, do you have anything else on his offense that you think we missed or you want to hit?
I did want to ask you about his handle, because Corey, I think with what we saw in his freshman season, I thought his handle was good, but I also did feel like there was a wildness and looseness to his handle at times, and also not all the time, just sometimes. And also, there were some times where I felt like he played a little sped up, but I don't necessarily mean that to be like it's a major issue. I say it because I think that's also like a developmental youth type of thing where maybe the lack of strength was part of it as well. Just something I wanted to bring up.
I don't know. I think like I think his handle is like really, really good. Like I think he's a really, really good ball handler. Like I think he's one of the best ball handlers in the class. I think he's got it pretty much got it on a string. And I think that like sometimes when he does see pressure, like he has like these like little behind the backs to like play into space instead of like continuing his momentum. I don't know. I'm pretty confident about his handle. I mean, look, he's a young 18-year-old kid like playing in the ACC. So like, sure, like, are there times he's going to look sped up? I think so, especially as he started garnering more attention. Like when you come out of the gate, you drop a triple double out of nowhere and you're a little unheralded. You might take people by surprise, but all of a sudden you do that, you pop up on Bleacher Report's mock at number 10 or whatever right away. Like now you're all of a sudden the number one guy on the scouting report, you know? And it's not like Pittsburgh had a lot of other guys that could create. So there was a lot of pressure on him to handle it. But the fact that like he wasn't turning it over and when he was pressured, either as a ball handler or, you know, a passer or whatever, I thought were really good signs. Shout out again to everybody in the comments. Victor Wembanyama asked a question, Spurs based, causing some stirs in the comments. Honestly, there's been so many comments, that I just can't go through and find it again. But, you know, maybe we'll touch on it at the end if we have time. You know, we do Q&As and stuff, but, you know, we got to get through Bub Carrington and Isaiah Collier here. But I would not, if I was the Cavaliers, I would not take the trade package that you offered from what I remember for Darius Garland, who I still think is very good. Okay, defensively. What did you think about him defensively? I guess now and projecting it.
I'm going to give you all my thoughts at once, Corey, because I didn't have a ton of thoughts on his defense.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that I wanted to say, only 8 blocks, 18 steals on the season. I'll just put that down. Didn't love that. He wasn't like a
low steal and block rates for sure.
Correct. Wasn't a wildly productive playmaker on the defensive side of the ball. I thought lateral movement was okay. I didn't think it was outstanding. However, size and length kind of covered a lot of that at times. I think overall, my biggest thing about him was that I thought that he grew and progressed as a defender throughout the season. I thought especially at the end of the season, his screen navigation actually improved a ton, where I felt like he was getting destroyed less on screens and did a really good job of snaking those and getting around them pretty well. My overall conclusion with him as a defender is that it is not going to be his marquee skill. I do not think he will be known as a defender. However, I did not think it was bad. I think it was just a thing where he was 18. He was a little bit on the weaker end. And you saw on defense, especially, there were times where you kind of saw the lack of strength. However, the biggest thing that made me walk away with some optimism is that I thought it really did progress throughout the season. And that was kind of enough for me. And it was enough for me to be like, I think he'll be fine.
Yeah. I'll touch on the defense just quickly. Free J in the comments says, how is Bub without the ball? Highlights, I see he's ball dominant with the ball. I think the fact that I think he can play with or without the ball. I thought like even when he had the ball, he was quick to like play off of Diaz Graham and like pitch it back to him, then come off a handoff. He would space the floor a lot.
Good cutter too. Sneaky.
Yeah, he would, and you can run him off screens. Like he didn't do it a ton, but like he looked really comfortable doing it. And a lot of the handoffs he would come off was like running off of motion and movement and stuff. So I'm a buyer in the fact that I think that that's kind of like why I buy into him a lot, is that I think he's going to be able to play with other guards who also need the ball in their hands. So yeah. Defensively, I like that he gets low in his stance. I like his length. 6'8" wingspan is solid. I think he moves his feet well. I wish that he put more ball pressure on sometimes and really got into guys' shirts and really made them work. I think that would help with the screen navigation a little bit. And so that, you know, because he's playing off a few feet when he gets hit with a screen, now he's really got a lot it takes a lot of effort to chase over, instead of if he's more attached to him, he'd be able to kind of like slither around the screen a little bit more. He definitely, again, needs to get stronger, and he will. There are times, he'd get bumped off his spot. Guy would dip their shoulder. Again, this is pretty normal stuff for freshman dudes. Off the ball, and I'd love to ask him. Sometimes it seemed like he was kind of like in denial on his man, and he would like turn his back to the ball sometimes. And like sometimes you would understand, like if he's guarding Joe Girardi on Syracuse, like you'd be like, all right, like I get why you're like playing him like that, but other times you're like, I don't know if you really need to focus on this guy off the ball so much. And then other times he showed good instincts where he would like kind of lag when his man would, go to the weak side corner, and he'd be in position to tag and then get back. So I don't know if it was like a schematic thing or like a young thing where it was like inconsistent and he needs just like more reps on that end. That'll be interesting. Where I'm at is he's 6'5", 6'5.5". He's got a 6'8" wingspan, and he plays hard on that end. And he's not a guy that I'm like, he's going to be targeted. I thought he had a lot of good moments this year. He had some not good moments, and I think that goes along with the territory. But if you're able to bring the skills that I think he has on offense, and you can survive on defense and not be somebody that a team is gonna, just have their mouth start watering, as you get into the playoffs and deeper into the season and stuff, and you're not going to get targeted, I think, that's kind of the baseline level of where you need to be. If he becomes a really great defender and all of a sudden he's Nickeil Alexander-Walker and we weren't expecting it, fantastic. But I think that he will just be, adequate. And so I think that's probably a good thing. Like, again, like I don't think either of these guys that we're talking about were like, these dudes are pit bulls. They could go play for Houston next year and fill Jamal Shedd's role, right? Like that's not what. But I think that right now, like I like the signs that I saw. I think he's going to be fine at the next level. And I like where, the chat, somebody asked, like, I want to know your opinion on Collier versus Bub. Norin Rad in the chat says Carrington versus Collier. Wow, I have Carrington mocked at 22, Collier at 23. So I think this is a good transition now to start getting into. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, I mean we have to sell me this pen on Bub Carrington.
All right, here we go. When it comes to Bub Carrington, it's as simple as he was as Corey mentioned, he is the youngest domestic player in this class. An absolute shooter, a bucket getter, a guy who can really shoot it from outside and in the mid range. Has got a good handle to him, real passing chops to him as well. You put him in a ball screen, and he's going to know what to do. And the thing with him is, I truly believe that what we saw from him as a shooter in college is the floor. He's only going to get better. He's going to become more efficient. We know that he can make decisive decisions coming off of these ball screens, and a guy that you can see playing, as we've talked about, both on and off the ball. I think he's actually a sneaky good cutter, a guy who moves really well off ball, and I think he's going to continue to develop as a catch and shoot jump shooter. So considering all those things, you should probably use a high-end pick on a guy like that, because offense is always at a premium. You need guys who can put the ball in the basket in the modern NBA. And so I think Bub Carrington would be a great choice for a lot of teams picking towards the middle, top, anywhere in the draft, honestly.
All right. So last thing before we move on, actually, and Smooth Hoops in the chat says Bub is in that Keontae George mold, and he just made the all-rookie team, and I like Bub even more than I like George. So, and I mentioned that comment because Keontae is the guy that I had on my list here. So if you're buying stock in Bub Carrington, who may you have bought stock in previously?
Dude, this was really, really hard for me. I think somebody in the chat before mentioned CJ McCollum.
On my list.
I think that's very interesting. Honestly, Corey, when we talked about it before, I think his size, length, offensive diet, archetype, all that stuff made it really, really difficult for me to find somebody I'm actually going to defer to you on that one because the only one that I could really think of was CJ, and I don't think that was the best one.
You know what? I think CJ is pretty good. Just because CJ's not a dude who puts a lot of pressure on the rim and does get by with his shot making ability. I did a BART query myself recently, and let me see if I can find it on Twitter. Yeah, so it was assist percentage over 20, defensive rebound over 15, over 10 3-point attempts per 100 possession freshman, and it was D'Angelo Russell and Cole Anthony. So I could see a little bit of the D-Lo.
Yeah.
But no bounce, Anthony Simons. Less bounce, Anthony Simons. He only had 2 dunks. So maybe no bounce, Anthony Simons. So, but like that kind of style, I think, but guys who don't put like a ton of pressure on the rim and mostly get by with their shot making, but also have a little bit of playmaking to their bag too. And guys that can play on and off the ball, most importantly, I think.
I have one. I don't know if you're going to love it, but
I'd love to hear it.
It would feel weird for me to not throw in a 90s guy. What about a little bit taller, right-handed Nick Van Exel? Just throwing that out there.
Well, I love Nick. Nick the Quick. Love Nick Van Exel. I could see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially like later on in his career, like what Van Exel became.
Dallas.
And stuff. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Like this guy who, was a point guard early on, later on became kind of like a, undersized off guard, playing with Nash and whatever. I think kind of interesting, but then also Van Exel had so much sauce. But then Carrington does too. So anyway, Nick Van Exel.
I like it. I like it a lot. All right. Isaiah Collier, USC guard, 6'4". I think he was like 6'2" and 3/4 or 6'2.5" without shoes. So we'll say 6'4", 205 pounds. So strong. We knew that. 6'5" wingspan, which not the best, but also like, if he's a point guard, like it's not terrible either. 19.7 years old on draft night. So he's like, almost a year older than Bub. 30 minutes per game, 16.3 points per game. 2.9 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 3.3 turnovers, 1.5 steals, 0.2 blocks, field goal percentage of 49, 3-point percentage of 33.8 on 3.6 attempts per game, 67.3 free throw percentage on 5.8 free throw attempts per game, 56.7 true shooting, 53.3 effective field goal, 19.3 per, BPM of 4.2. Preseason stock price. ESPN had him at 1. No Ceilings had him at 8. Bleacher Report at 3. Yahoo at 1. Athletic at 2. Tankathon at 2. He was the 3rd ranked prospect on the Draft Deck IPO with an average price of 3.2. Currently, ESPN has him at 11. No Ceilings at 16. Bleacher Report at 8. Yahoo at 15. The Ringer at 16. The Athletic at 14. Tankathon at 14. Average price of 13.4. 12th ranked prospect on the May draft rankings. So, at 13.4, is Isaiah Collier stock price too high, too low, or is it just right?
Oh, God. Corey, for me, it's too high. I have Collier now at 23 on my board. And no, 24. I apologize. I have him actually right behind Carrington, just like one of our viewers. And Collier's a guy that I've been able to watch in person. A guy who, to be honest, even when I saw him in person, didn't change my mind a ton in terms of what I saw on film and then what I saw in person. But
and you saw him in multiple contexts because you saw him at the Hoop Summit and then you saw him a few times at USC.
An interesting player, for sure. Very interesting player. I think the measurements were interesting because we are the same height. I've stood next to him 20 times and we are exactly the same height. So whatever he measured at, I think it was 6'2"-ish, right? Without shoes, that sounds about right. So no lies were told there. But it just, freak athlete, really exciting getting downhill. We'll get into the scout. Let me stop there. But
I want to talk about his athleticism, actually.
Sure. But I think overall, I have him in that range just because there are some real warts to his game that he's going to have to change my mind on. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I came out higher on him after, diving back into him. He was really rough at the beginning of the year to where I was kind of like, he's not draftable right now. And, he was struggling or whatever,
Yes.
and he finished the season on a much higher note. So I think his stock is just right now.
Okay.
I'm not sure I would necessarily take him in the lottery because he's just not the kind of player philosophically that, I think I would want running my team, but I get the appeal of what he could be if he maxes out his potential. Even though I think the NBA is kind of moving away from that style of guard, but I do get it. And I do think that like he was pretty good towards the end of his season. And I thought it was admirable how, he at least helped USC be a little bit competitive towards the end, even though they had a overall pretty rough season. All right. Where do you want to start with Isaiah Collier? You said you have Bub ahead of Collier. I have Bub ahead of him as well. So where do you want to start with Collier?
Court, we could start on offense. We could start with shooting. We just start on offense overall. I think that's a good.
Let's start with his. Let's start with his. I guess strength. Right, and which is clearly like his downhill driving, his rim pressure. You mentioned his athleticism, right? If you watch him, absolute blur in the open court.
Yes.
Right, in transition, like he's got that 0 to 60 speed. And whether he has the ball in his hands or whether he's like leaking out, he can just get ahead of guys. So he's a terror in transition with or without the ball in his hands. Super bursty, right? Like that first step burst is really impressive. And he can just kind of blow by in a straight line. When he's in the air, I think he's got pretty good hang time, which allows for some pretty creative finishes, but he's not super bouncy.
Yes.
He's really not bouncy like at all. And you don't expect that from him because he is so fast, right? And you think of like, you try to be like, all right, well, like Derrick Rose, John Wall, these fast guards, maybe De'Aaron Fox, right? And it's like all these dudes were like able to play above the rim, and like Collier can't really play above the rim in the same way. You know what I mean? Especially because he's like 205. Like he got blocked 27 times this year. Like, which is, kind of a lot. He only had 6 dunks. Now, he missed a little bit of time, but like for, reference on the dunks, like Reed Sheppard had 5. And like De'Aaron Fox had 19 in his season. So, and again, like Collier missed some time, so he would have had more than 6 dunks, but like even before the injury, he wasn't like throwing it down over dudes. Like it was, there was a point in time in the season when he was healthy, he had less dunk than Reed Sheppard. But with that said, he is a pretty good finisher in the half court, 56.4%, 61% overall, can absorb contact, he can stay balanced. So whether like he's like, putting up a floater or he's getting to the rim, he can still kind of remain, in his trajectory when he handles contact, a little bit different than like Bub. Like he can go through your chest. Like there was a drive Cody Williams was ISO'd on it, or he had Cody Williams on an island, top of the key in a Colorado game, and he just went straight through him. Like he dipped his shoulder into Cody and just pushed Cody underneath the hoop and just had like a wide open layup because of it. So like, even though he's not like super vertical, he can still be effective near the rim. And again, he has some even though he's not getting super high, there are times where he has like up and unders, like, and shows some touch around the rim too. But yeah, I think that, the finishing, if that's going to be his biggest strength, you do kind of wish he was even a little bit better than that. But like, I think he's going to be a good finisher in the NBA. They're just, right now, he hasn't shown to be a super vertical, put you on a poster type of athlete. And like, I do think that there were times where he struggled against length. And again, like that's going to be his strength. I think he'll figure it out, but I think it could be a journey early on.
I cannot agree with you more about everything that you said. Saw it in person. Even in warm-ups, he's not doing anything that crazy in layup lines with the dunks and whatever. It's just he's not that type of vertical athlete. I also love what you said about the straight line speed with him getting downhill. He is one of these guys that seems to add more as he gets hit more, if that makes sense. And we've had guys like that in the past that we've talked about, almost like a King T'Challa in Black Panther, where his suit just embraces more and more damage, and that gives him more and more power type of situation with Collier. And it's definitely there. The issue with him is I thought, sorry, Corey, I don't know if you mentioned this, but like I thought the touch was okay. Touch is so with him. The biggest thing with him though is just like he's such a blur getting downhill and so physical that it creates a lot of opportunities for him, especially in college against college defenders. The only issue will be that the scouting report will be out on him in terms of his outside shooting. And because of the lack of an outside jumper, NBA teams are going to be much better prepared for the Isaiah Collier drive. So I think the Collier thing, like, yeah, definitely interesting, but there are real holes to his game that will make even his strength a little bit more difficult for him to get to on the next level.
The other thing, and teams are, obviously the scout is going to be like, make him a shooter, right? Like,
yep,
that's obvious. Go under on ball screens. There's still going to be times where it doesn't matter. And I think like if he's in the right situation with better shooters, it's not like he had snipers around him necessarily at USC. So if he has more space, better shooters around him, even if guys are going under, I still think he can find his way to the rim. It'll be harder for sure.
Yeah.
Like we saw Scoot struggle a lot, right, this year. And Scoot is a better prospect to me, like than Collier is. And they have a lot of similarities in the kind of archetype of player. And we saw how hard it was for Scoot at times. But I still think that you see the flashes, and I think Collier will show those same flashes too. So teams are obviously going to prove that he can punish unders, whatever. But like in the half court specifically, when because he is able, he's got a good handle, tight, good, like quick crossover, like again, like super violent movements.
Yes.
But it's a lot of catch and hold, man. It's a lot of like get the ball, take a couple dribbles back, line a guy up. All right, nothing's there. Now I'll move off of it. Like there's just, and I just don't know about those kind of dudes in the NBA. And maybe it shifts. And like, look, I know that it was a crowded backcourt, but like it didn't go well, and like Boogie Ellis all of a sudden can play with the ball in his hands a little bit more and goes from a guy who nobody talked about this year at all to a guy who like had a great G League elite camp, good combine, and all of a sudden he's back to people like, oh, who like can shoot a little bit and like can create his own shot? Like Boogie Ellis can do that. And I know it was a weird situation all around with that backcourt, but like one of my concerns is like because of that, and let's talk about it in the context of his shooting, just like he has to be he has to be your ball handler. You have to commit to him and give him the keys to make it work, I think. Like, I think he would struggle to play like next to somebody else who needs the ball in their hands at all. Otherwise, I guess you need like a Malik Monk next to him. And who obviously like, he can create his own offense, but like a Bradley Beal, like you need one of those guys next to him in the backcourt. Because you need a shooter, you need space next to him, right? So like putting like a Jalen Suggs would not be good, like that kind of guy, right? Like, and Suggs he got better as a shooter this year, so shout out to Jalen Suggs.
Yes.
But just in the like, I just wonder, like, all right, we got to watch him dribble, or come off a screen and get into the paint and get to the rim. I just don't know if stylistically, if that's what winning basketball teams do nowadays, especially like when you're not an outlier athlete. Like Anthony Edwards, obviously, like something he struggled with early a little bit, like trying to find, and Isaiah Collier is going to come into the NBA like a much, much better passer than like, or with more of a passing mindset than Anthony Edwards had. Anthony Edwards showed some pretty sick playmaking flashes at Georgia, like that, like 3/4 court transition bounce pass. I think it was in the Maui Invitational was insane. So it was always there, whatever. But like finding that balance of like putting pressure on the rim, pulling up for jump shots, getting other guys involved, moving off the ball. These are all real questions that I have about Collier and his game. So like, while I do think he can get to the rim and put pressure on it, I just like, I don't know how valuable or how good your team's offense is going to be if he's specifically the one who is kickstarting it. And I kind of think that his style of play is that he needs to be the guy that's kickstarting it and has that high usage. I mean, what was his usage? Like 30% this year?
Double check.
Like I think it was like 30% this year. Like
his usage was 29.7. Yeah. Right there.
So right around 30%. And then like, I don't know, like, do you have a lot of confidence in him, like playing off the ball a lot? Like, I just don't think instinctively, like, all right, so as a shooter, do I think he could be like a 36% shooter, right around league average? Maybe a couple of years, right? Like, I don't know if it'll be consistent. Like the fact that he's not a good free throw shooter doesn't lend a ton of confidence to me. I think he's got the Draymond shooting package. He's got the backpack thing. Stiff kind of follow through, no real fluidity. Like it's like stiff a little bit. Sometimes like I think he's going to be a guy who makes shots because he's going to take shots. Like I think he's not going to lack confidence pulling up necessarily. He'll shoot if a guy goes under, I think. But like I don't know about the catch and shoot stuff. I think the shooting is a real issue for a guy who you might need to like kickstart your offense. And I just don't know if he's like Luka's never been a high percentage 3-point shooter, but like Luka can manipulate everything on the court and he's hitting tough shots and he's 6'7" or 6'8" or whatever the hell he is. So like, I don't know. I think it's like different than like the type of shooter that like Luka is, where he's the offense and he's the engine. And I don't know, maybe if Collier was 6'7" or 6'8", it'd be different. But like, I think they're different playmakers.
Corey, so, I think this is a good time for me to come in because the first thing, I think the last thing that you said about Luka, I think that applies to Trae Young, Devin Booker, both guys. I don't know if you knew this because I was shocked when I wrote about this in my piece coming up. Trae Young and Devin Booker have never shot over 40% in the season from three, which I didn't know. And I was like, oh, that's interesting.
No, I actually would have guessed that.
Yeah, but exactly. But the thing is, high volume, right? Mm-hmm. They take a lot of them, which is good. And it's fine. And it's a big part of their games. And it's an important part of their games because it's something that, they've never shot it over 40%, but they take a ton of them and they make enough where it's a threat, right? Mm-hmm. Collier this season only took 3 and he shot 33.8%. For me, Collier, it's not even about the numbers. I've seen him shoot live. I've seen him in shoot around. I've seen him in a practice setting. I've seen him shoot in a game. I think his shot needs to be completely reconstructed from the ground floor is really how I view it, Corey. I've seen him miss so many jump shots in a row that I lost count. Was a real thing that happened. He was in the corner shooting with Bronny James and Oziah Sellers, and they were hitting their shots, and he absolutely could not, to the point where he was like starting to lose confidence and he needed to walk away and drink some Gatorade and come back. Is the type of shooter that Isaiah Collier is right now. And that's a real first person thing that I witnessed on my own. And I've told you about it as well. I think his jumper needs a ton of work for him to even be at 33% is where I'm at, Corey, truly. And I think quickly before you finish, I just want to say, because we talked about Bub and he actually shot better from 3 than Bub. Yeah.
But the volume is the differentiator. It's the differentiator, is the volume.
No, Collier took 3 per game, but also his totals, he only took 80 all season, right? He went 27 for 80 from outside. But trust me, like I've seen it literally him standing right in front of me, and it looks really disconnected. As you mentioned, there is a Draymond aspect to his shot. His base comes and goes. Just overall, even also the way he finishes at the top, sometimes it's clean, sometimes it's not. Sometimes even in warm-ups, dude, I'm telling you, it would come and go. Sometimes he's doing the amen thing with his hand going the other way. There were a lot of things about his jumper where I watched him and I was like, you need to spend a lot of time on this jumper for it to even be respectable, is kind of where I'm at, Corey. With that being said, I still think that there's a world where he can figure it out and, like you mentioned, be at like a 35% type of thing. And also even like from the mid-range, there were times where I'd see him take some pull-up jumpers and I was like, oh, that doesn't look terrible, right? Is something that I did want to give him credit for. But overall, Corey, I think the most important thing that you said was that you were like, I'm not sure if NBA teams are looking for this prototype of guard. And I think you saying that is so important because my comp for him has not changed. I still see him as a less bouncy modern day Stephon Marbury. And I think it's important that we throw that in there because if Stephon Marbury was in this class with less bounce, where does he get taken? I think that's somewhere between 14 to 25 is my opinion, right? Obviously, I think with Collier and Marbury, give him credit. Like he was such a flashy playmaker, was so good getting downhill, a guy who was willing to take jumpers from outside, but he was never a good outside jump shooter, right?
Still, he was better.
Correct. He was better. And he had more confidence as well than Collier does right now, which is an important thing. I don't know if that's Brooklyn, if that's the Coney Island in him, but I just think that this prototype of player is hard to get around for me right now. And so the biggest thing for me, though, that I want to close with is that the shooting is far away. I saw him miss so many that I lost count. So I really do hope he spends this time in the pre-draft process really working on the jumper, both from, off the catch, off the dribble, because if he can get the shooting to a respectable level, Corey, I think it completely changes the discussion. And of course, we can say that for any prospect, like, oh yeah, if Khalil Ware shot it, 40% from outside, whatever, these things happen for all of them. But with Collier, especially, like if he can get it to respectable, I think he's a really, really interesting prospect.
Yeah, he's still, I walked away thinking, all right, he's more interesting than like I was giving him credit for being.
Okay.
Because I do think the downhill stuff is impressive. I do like how he came back and he helped the team and they were better with him. I do think that like strength and being a strong, like I think there is like a good enough floor for him that he is an NBA player. Like I don't really see many scenarios where he isn't an NBA player. And I think that's valuable, especially because there are some players in the lottery where I'm like, yeah, I don't know. He might not be an NBA player like that are projected to go there. I think Collier probably is an NBA player. It's just like, is he bouncing around and because he can't figure out a way to shoot and he's not like a good enough offensive engine that a team has given him the keys after his first team. And now all of a sudden, like he's just trying to figure out how to fit into a new role. That's what I'm still kind of struggling with because if he figures it out and he's just a league average shooter. And like, I think that he's going to be the type of guard that can lead you to the playoffs, but because there's so much talent right now until there's like expansion, it's just like, is it the play-in game or is it the playoffs? And like the Kings didn't make the playoffs. De'Aaron Fox is like your top outcome for him. Like that's the kind of player is like your top. And having De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis doesn't guarantee you a playoff spot as building blocks. And those two dudes are fucking awesome.
Yep.
Right? Like, so there is a lot, and again, a lot of it comes down to I just don't know what he does off ball. Like he doesn't have like the instinctual stuff to where, let's say, like I saw Kobe Johnson attack, from the left side of the court, got baseline, and Isaiah Collier was on the right wing, And instead of like flattening out to the corner, he just stood at the wing. And now Kobe Johnson didn't have anybody to pass it to where it would have just been an open corner 3 if Collier just would have flattened out. Like there are things that are instinctually, like maybe that could be coached up, but like you don't know if it can. Yeah. And like some guys just have it. They have that feel. I don't like, it doesn't seem like Collier ultimately knows what to do when the ball isn't in his hands. And I think the way the game is played, like you want multiple ball handlers, you want multiple guys who can play with the ball in their hands. And if he doesn't have the ball in his hands, it takes away his effectiveness. So you have to make him the high usage guy. And maybe it works out because I guess this is probably a good time to talk about, like, he's a good playmaker, right? Like, don't get me wrong, especially early in the year, he was making some choices.
Not in a good way, guys.
Not in a good way. But I really feel like at the end of the year, when he came back from his injury, he did a much better job of playing like a more nuanced game. Because he's very creative as a passer. He like throws bullets.
He does.
Like
Marbury-esque.
Like really can fire it in there. He can make, he can come off the screen. He can make the weak side hits. He can get baseline and all the creative, flashy stuff. He can hit the roller. He can make the pocket passes. He can do all. He's a great passer. His decision making, I'm willing to say, is less great because he's not always making the right decision. Yes. But I think that he can get there, and I think it got better, and I think that it will, be an asset for him at the next level. But like, and I've used this analogy before. To me, like, it's almost like Collier's playmaking is almost like freestyle rapping. He is a very reactive passer. So like he can ride a beat and like he'll give you bars and you'd be like, yo, that was a sick bar. that was tough. But like, can he make a hit song? Can he write a hook? Can he write a verse? Can he get the pre-chorus? Can he hit the bridge? Like, can he make a hit song and orchestrate an offense? Or is he just a dude who's going to make these super flashy plays because he can get in the paint and collapse the defense? Can he be Chris Paul? Can he just be like, I'm going to dribble slowly to the right elbow off this ball screen because the threat of my pull-up is going to pull over the defense and I'm going to be able to fire the ball to my weak side shooter? I don't know. Maybe he can. Maybe he can. I thought he got better towards the end of the year. And again, I think he has the skills as a passer and the vision to do it. It's just like, is he going to be able to achieve the nuance that it takes to master the point guard position? And that's what he needs to do in order to make use of his high usage role. He has to be able to master running the point.
Yeah. Corey, just want to go over a couple of things. Assist percentage 30.9.
Really strong. Really strong. Good.
Turnover percentage 18.7. However, as we mentioned, I thought he cleaned it up a lot towards the end of the season.
Yeah. So not terrible.
Exactly. 29.7 usage rate, right? It is what it is. And I think high. But I think I'm right there with you, Corey. Your battle rap one is incredible. I'm just thinking, like, is he DNA? Is he Roan? Is he dumbfounded? Just trying to figure out which battle rapper.
I'll even throw it old school. Like, is he just on a DJ Clue mixtape?
Okay.
Like, is he a mixtape dude, or was he a dude who can, like, you can actually, was he like, you want to be Ja Rule in that era, but you might have to be, I don't know, stack bundles. I don't know.
But yeah, with Collier, like, obviously, I 100% agree with everything that you said. Even seeing it in person, good passer, man. Like, he just is. Like, we don't have to get
straight up
crazy. Just exactly straight up a good passer. The decision making can be wild, but look, also hey man, Collier also young. Like, obviously Bub is younger, but also Collier still, it's college
and also
kid.
Didn't play in like a great context with a great team with other great that shooters and spacers.
Yeah, that team was rough. I'm still a Oziah Sellers believer. I hope he figures it out in Stanford. I hope he gets a real chance there. He's transferred over there. Iwuchukwu was really hard to watch. Like, you look at that guy and he looks like a Greek god. Like, his physique is crazy and he's so tall and stuff, but it just wasn't working out.
He's gonna figure it out.
Yeah, maybe. And I know he had a heart thing.
Hope so. Yeah.
Freshman season. So I want to give him some credit. But anyway, just like with Kobe Johnson and Bronny and everything, it just wasn't pretty a lot of the times. And also, Corey, I forgot to mention what you said about Boogie Ellis is so spot on, because every time I watch him in person, I'm like, oh, he can go. Like, he can score, he can shoot, like, he's doing stuff on the floor. So shouts to Boogie. I think he played 6 years in college or something. So shouts to him. But with Collier, I think I'm right there with you. I think he's a flawed point guard combo prospect, a guy who has real strengths though. Like, he's actually strong, he's actually fast. He can finish at the cup. He can really pass the ball, but there are like big warts, right? He's got like, these big old corns on his feet that he's got to get rid of, like, for him to really be a high-end prospect. And I'm just afraid that if he doesn't get those figured out, he might be kind of an outdated type of prospect like we've talked about. So I'll end it there.
All right, let's get to his defense. Something that also got better at the end of the season, because he was, let's say, indifferent to defense at the beginning of the season. I think indifferent would be a generous way to put it.
Nice way to put it.
But I think he's got good tools. And I think he's another guy who moves his feet well. I think he, like, when he's engaged, he's using his length. So, like, all right, 6'5" wingspan, not the longest in the world, but, not stubs. So, like, he's wide. He's using it. He's strong enough to fight through screens. I thought his effort got better later in the season. Maybe somebody spoke to him and was like, hey, you need to, like, turn things around and be effort. Good in the passing lanes, but he is, like, very, very prone to ball watching. And that was obviously something that he struggled with early in the year. It's something that he struggled with later in the year. Like, in the first, like, 10 minutes of the game, I lost count of how many times Arizona back cut him in one of his last games of the year. So he's just very focused on the ball. He needs to keep his head on a swivel. Again, maybe this is just a coaching up thing. Hopefully that's all that is. We didn't talk about the fact that he is an atrocious rebounder. I don't want to throw that word around because, like, all right, he's an iffy shooter, maybe not the best shooter. No, he's an atrocious rebounder. He's like, I think his defensive rebounding percentage was like 8.9 or something. Like, for a dude who is as strong as he is and, like, as athletic as he is, that dude should be rebounding the ball, man. Like, he should be rebounding the ball, grabbing and going, starting the break, and he just does not go after boards. And, like, not good. That's not good. We talk about all the time, rebounding translates, right? He don't rebound.
Also, Corey, we didn't give Bub credit for his rebounding. His defensive rebounding percentage is double that, and he averaged like 5 a game. Yep.
And this is a dude who we think is like, all right, maybe he's a little slender and weak. No, like, rebound, you got to want it, man.
Yes.
Like, dude, again, bringing back to Josh Hart. This dude was grabbing 18 rebounds a game just out of fucking trying hard.
I fucking love Josh Hart.
And I'm not asking anybody to go grab 18 rebounds a game, but, like, dude, go get a couple more boards. Like, go get it. Go get the ball.
Corey,
go after it.
Everything that you're saying, though, for me, with watching Collier, and you're right, he did get better at the end of the season, but the overarching theme throughout the season was that he didn't want it. And I think it wasn't just the rebounding. I think defensively too, like, something that I wrote in my notes here is that he's strong, but he didn't leverage his strength all the time. Like, I wish he was better about that. Like, something that you talk about all the time, going back to a couple of years ago when we were talking about Davion Mitchell and the way that he used his strength to really mess with guys, getting his chest into people, getting them off their angles, getting them off their paths, right? Because he was so strong. And I look at Collier, I'm like, what are you lacking, bud? Like, you're strong, you're athletic, you can really mess with people with that, right? But he didn't, because I think it goes back to what you just said, Corey. He didn't want it. when it wasn't just the rebounding. And I think in a lot of ways he didn't want it. And I think, of course, once again, let's give him credit. He did get better over the course of the season, but we need to see more of that. With his physical gifting, right, as a lateral mover and with the strength that he has, he should be a much better defender. And if he had the type of defensive season that he potentially could have had with his baseline abilities, right, we might be talking about Collier way different right now, just even off the defensive stuff. And it's just, there was so much bad tape at the beginning of the season, and also just overall, just, you know, as you mentioned, the off-ball stuff and getting lost and, you know, getting caught watching the ball. It really, for me, was a desire thing. I think if he wants it, he can do it because there's nothing that he lacks. Yeah, the wingspan isn't what it is, but there are a lot of good defenders out there that don't have the craziest wingspan. It's not like having a long wingspan is a requisite part of being a good defender. That's just not true, right?
No.
But with Collier, he can be a good defender even without the wingspan. It's just up to him wanting it.
Yeah, well, and we're going to find out how much do you want it, right? Like, because you're going to have to defend at the next level, because you don't defend, like, you're probably not going to be that top 3 prospect that's just going to be gifted minutes. Like, we see dudes taken in the first round. Taylor Hendricks was a lottery pick who spent time in the G League, top 10 pick in the G League, right? Like, so you got to show this kind of effort. Like, the league is too talented now, man. Now, like, we talk about how, like, he's going to need this very specific, like, situation. What teams offer him that in your mind? Let's say, so his stock price is about 12, right? Like, that's what it was. He was like the 12th ranked prospect on the draft deck. So by looking at the teams around there,
you said 12, right?
Yes, it was like 12 or 13. Here's what I see.
You gonna say Miami?
Well, Miami is on my list,
okay,
but because I think that if they took him, they'd be like, yeah, you are going to do this stuff or you won't play. We'll play some dude who we signed off the scrap heaps. He won, the fan gets to, he won a raffle and now he gets a jersey. Like, we'll play that dude over you if you don't.
Boogie Ellis.
Right. Like,
straight up.
But I think that kind of culture, if he could buy into it, would maximize his talent for sure. But, like, if you're taking a chance on his talent, on his high school ranking, all of that, and you're like, he just needs the situation, Utah at 10 would be the team that I think would fit the best. A ton of spacing with their big shooters. I think Keontae, I had Keontae top 5 all of last year. And I think that Keontae is going to be a guy who swings on the ball and off the ball. And part of why I liked him so much is because I think he's so good off the ball. But playing with a bunch of guys who can space the floor, like, if Taylor Hendricks is going to play more next year, he can space the floor. Like, obviously, Laurie is an incredible floor spacer. Bryce Sensabaugh, maybe he gets more minutes. He could space the floor. So, like, around a ton of floor spacing so he can use that rim pressure to kick out the shooters and take advantage of the gravity that they create. He's got a lob threat partner in a guy like Walker Kessler. There are pieces there that I could be like, all right, like, if he's it might not be like the best pick for Utah. I'm not saying I would pick him if I was Utah, but if I was him, I'd be like, outside of the fact that it's Utah, I would be like, this is a good structure for me to head into. Because outside of that, it's like Washington.
I have a suggestion, Corey. The Sixers aren't really going to have a roster next season.
They've got
3 guys signed for next season.
That's right.
I like Nick Nurse as an offensive coach. I like the idea of, maybe you throw Collier in there as a backup point guard. Maybe in backup minutes, he gets to play with Joel, and Joel obviously has shown he can shoot it from the outside, and who knows who else they have. We really don't know who else they're going to have on that roster, but we know Maxi's going to be there, and we know Maxi can swing on and off. I think it's like an interesting swing for them because we really don't know what that roster is going to look like.
Yeah.
The last one I would bring up was, I don't love this one just because RJ's there, but the Raptors. Just, with that young roster and what they're going to do. It's just like, I think oddly, like a lot of the things that he does on the court are very similar to what RJ Barrett's going to be asked to do and continue to be asked to do there.
Yeah. And then but then spacing issues like Scotty too, like he'll have the ball in his hands. I thought about them for a second and then I was like, they're not going to take the ball out of Scotty's hands for Isaiah Collier.
But maybe the Sixers, maybe.
Like Sixers, like you said, bench guard, change of pace. Maybe he does a little bit Tyrese Maxey impersonation without some of the shooting. But I think it's hard, like, to see him early in. Like, I don't know. Maybe if the Spurs really like the mid-8, I think it's tough early in the draft, like in the lotto. Like, there aren't a lot of destinations that fit. And then as you get deeper, like, he can't go to Orlando. I don't like him in New Orleans. Cleveland, why would they do that? Phoenix, like, oh, they need a point guard. It's like, yeah, but like you're not giving him the ball when you have those dudes on the team. Like that, it's a different kind of guy. It's rough. He would never play for Tibbs.
Never.
Although Tibbs does do good with these kind of point guards. So,
yeah,
but he'd have to guard. He would have to guard. If he makes it to 24, like Tibbs isn't like, who I'm giving the keys to? And obviously, like Brunson, he's not going to overthrow Brunson on the throne in New York. So it's stylistically the way he plays. I think it's just going to be hard. And it might just be a team going, we don't care about fit. We're going to take the player that we think is the best player, the best talent, and we're just going to take him and we'll figure it out. And if that works, awesome. Like, you got a great player, right? Like, he figures it out. If not, all right, maybe then hopefully the next team figures him out. So
I will say though, Corey, the Knicks one I'm reconsidering just because maybe they put him on the Deuce McBride plan where they're like, we'll grab you and we're going to give you 3 years to develop. And over the next 3 years, you got to learn how to play defense. You work on your outside jumper. And maybe you become, because the thing.
Yeah, but Deuce was wired different. He wanted to defend.
Yeah. But my thing with Collier though is that like the Knicks don't really have a guard that can come in and run the offense because Deuce is so limited as a ball handler.
He's a catch and shoot dude.
Exactly.
With a little bit of like pick and roll stuff. Yeah.
Maybe Collier, but yeah.
Yeah, I would understand taking the swing, and obviously like Tibbs, Derrick Rose, like. Had a really great season under Tibbs. And even, Tibbs has always done well with guards. John Lucas,
we have Rokas coming.
Augustine.
Hopefully.
So yeah, but again, like that's 24, 25 in that range. If he lasted to the Knicks, which I don't think he's going to, but I also don't think he's like, I could see him falling to the 20s. I could see it. Not all of these guys can fall to the 20s, but like some of them can.
Yes.
Because I think that NBA teams are going to have way different boards than what the consensus internet rankings are. All right. So if you're buying stock in Isaiah Collier, who may you have bought stock in previously? I think we mentioned most of them. You mentioned Marbury. I still think that's the best one.
I want to give Dirty Dancer a shout out though, because Dirty Dancer was like Baron Davis when he lost his verticality. I was like,
pretty good,
bad. pretty
good,
good
90s, 2000s, 2000s.
But I'm gonna stick with Marbury. Just I like the Marbury one. I'll just stay there.
Yeah, I guess like if you were like, oh, but look, Tyrese Maxey turned into a shooter in the NBA after only shooting 29% in college. Tyrese Maxey had good form and he was a good free throw shooter. Is a different thing. He just needed to make some tweaks. De'Aaron Fox, he's turned himself into a pretty good shooter, right? But I think De'Aaron Fox is a better athlete, even though Collier has a much better frame coming in. And then it's like Colin Sexton, Emmanuel Mudiay. Like there are ways that this doesn't go great. I think there are high end outcomes for Collier, but like there are ways that it doesn't go great too. So yeah, Naren Reed says consensus currently has Collier at 13, Carrington at 23. Like, dude, if I can get Bub Carrington at 23, like, dude, I'm doing that. He's the 20. Bub was 26 ranked on our draft rankings at No Ceilings, right? and Collier was 12th. Yeah, so like I'd rather take Bub if they both were just in general. Like I said, I have Bub top 10, but I get it. I get it with Collier's talent. And with that said, Albert, I need you to sell me this pen on Isaiah Collier.
I had to compose myself first before I did this one. Okay, here we go. So when it comes to Isaiah Collier, it's pretty simple. If you need a guy who is a supreme lateral athlete, a guy who is really dynamic getting downhill, who could finish at the cup with strength and power and athleticism, then I think Isaiah Collier is a really interesting option for you. He's a really good passer, a guy who has his warts, a guy who really needs to work on his defense. He needs to work on his outside shooting. But if you're a team in the late lottery, teens, in the 20s, and you're looking for a developmental guard that has some really high-end abilities that you could see one day potentially becoming a lead guard, then you should take a shot on Isaiah Collier. It's just that he's going to have to work on the outside shooting, has to become a better defender. But if he can work on those things, the sky's the limit.
The sky is the limit for Isaiah Collier. And again, I came away higher on him after diving back into his film, especially his more recent film, because the talent is a lot to like there with the talent, for sure. All right, Albert, great episode, long episode. Tell the people where they can find you.
You can find me at Alberto Gim on Twitter is where you can find me. You can find me at GTG NBA on Instagram. As always, I'm styled by Kevin Park and A Bit NYC. I'm wearing their little quarter button sweater action thing. I need to be better about describing these things to you guys, but if you're interested, check out abit.nyc on Instagram, as he's always dropping new things. Also, we have our own collab that is being prepared, where if you're a fan of mine or Kevin's, then you can check out some of the collab stuff that will be dropping soon, is where you can find me.
Gonna be fire. You can find me at Corey Tulliva on Twitter /X, NBA Draft Dude elsewhere. Just dropped a film sesh with Dylan Jones on the channel. I think I've done eight film sessions so far. Dylan was really insightful. I just love the way he breaks down the game, man. Like, super intriguing prospect, chip on his shoulder, wants to be great, loves the game. And if you watch it, you'll learn a lot, not only about him, but about the game itself, I think. So, and then, I think we got a bunch of exciting film sessions coming up that we're excited about, and a lot of great stuff at NoCeilingsNBA.com on the written front. I've been doing a little bit more video stuff and editing, so I got to get back on my writing game soon. But yeah, make sure you're locked into the YouTube, man. And again, thank you for watching with us live. Everyone who has watched with us live, thank you. If you're on the podcast feed, thank you for listening. Make sure that you give us a 5-star rating, review, share it with your friends, like, subscribe on YouTube. That helps a lot. No Ceilings is getting pretty close to 10K on YouTube, so that would be sick if we can get there before the draft. I think we got a shot to do that, so make sure you're locked in there for all the good stuff that we got. And until next week, got a fun episode, I think, coming up next week. So until next time, we are out. Peace.